I know what you're thinking. Oh, here's some wannabe Nico Rosberg questioning if a driver's career is over, but please give me a chance. If you told me even as recently as 3 to 4 months ago that Alex Albon would be out of Formula 1, then I'd probably think that you'd have some marbles in your head. But now it's looking like a genuine possibility. But knowing me, soon after I make this video, he'll get confirmed for either Red Bull or AlphaTauri next season. So yeah, if that happens, then obviously ignore everything I'm going to say here. I do feel for Alex Albon. He's got a genuine, humble personality and has a tenacious work ethic and has earned everything he's gotten. At the opening race of the season, it looked like he was set for his first ever podium in the opening race of the season, where he was heartbreakingly punted off the road by Lewis Hamilton in a battle for P2. And even would finish 5th or above for 3 of the next 4 races too, which is not awful at all. But Albon's performances have declined over the season to the point now where if you don't include his first ever podium at Tuscany, which was very nice to see by the way, he's had only one other finish inside the points in the last 6 races, and that was just a 10th place finish at Russia. Being in a Red Bull, you should be minimum top 5, well probably top 4 to be honest, but being Albon's first full season in the car, it'd be a slight pass for a top 5. But he's currently 9th in the championship with 64 points, just 1 point behind the guy who he replaced in Pierre Gasly. He's also 31 points behind Daniel Ricciardo, who's 4th, and 98 points behind teammate Max Verstappen, which is insane to think about. Like, you expect him to be behind Verstappen, that's fine, but to be that far back is absolutely concerning. I should mention that this is no different to Pierre Gasly, who was actually 1 point worse off in 2019 than Albon this year, when you look at the points tallies after the 12th race of the season. So there isn't really any difference between the seasons that these drivers have had in the first full season at Red Bull. I will touch on this a bit more in depth later. It's strange because Albon looked really solid when he was in the Red Bull for the final 9 odd races and scored 76 points in these races, and still hasn't reached this total in more races in 2020, 13 to be exact so far this season. There are 4 races left for this season, so if Albon shows that he can keep up with Verstappen and finish in the top 4 for these events, then maybe he will convince the team to keep him on, but I honestly fear that it is too late for this now. Some may say that Albon should be kept on because he's still young and still developing. But the problem with this is that Red Bull, with only one driver in the fight to win a race amongst 2 Mercedes cars, can easily get picked off for strategy, where Verstappen can only cover one of the Mercedes strategies, but not the other Mercedes strategy in the second car. Basically what I'm trying to say is that there is no rear gunner that can help Verstappen when he is having to fight 2 cars when he can easily get overtaken by the other car due to only being able to cover off one car when it comes to strategy. But looking at his interview at the conclusion of the Grand Prix at Imola, you can really tell that he's a really shattered man and a man that has little confidence at the moment. The fact that he believed that he was hit at the back when he span just after the safety car restart shows me that he is in disbelief and shock as to how lost he looks on the track to an extent at this stage. I don't know, maybe I'm looking into it a bit too much, but that's just my view at least. Is Alex Albon another victim of another poor decision made by Red Bull? I think there's a very strong case for this. Remember, last year was just his rookie season, and putting him straight into a Red Bull may have looked like the right move at the time, but in the end, just like with Gasly, it was and is clearly too early for Albon to be able to perform to the required level in the Red Bull. Helmut Marko surely needs to be criticised here, and realise that this is 2 major mistakes now, which has not only hampered the development in this program, but also affected Red Bull's ability to fight with the front runners of Mercedes, and it just makes things so difficult when it's 2 against 1. Another factor that I think may have made an impact for Albon's poor performances is the car. Is Red Bull's car really that great? I do think that Max Verstappen is regularly outperforming the capabilities of the car, and I think the car is truly closer to the performance of the Renault or Racing Point than to the Mercedes, so basically stuck in the middle just about. Verstappen does an amazing job of making the car look better than what it actually is. While Alex Albon should no doubt be better, I think to expect him to be even and matching Verstappen might be an expectation too high. This is on top of the fact that Verstappen has been in Formula 1 for 6 seasons now. I think many people forget this. Verstappen, even at the age of 23, is still more experienced in Formula 1 than many drivers on the grid and already has well over 100 races under his belt. He is also a generational talent which is something you can only say for about 5 to maybe 6 drivers in a decade. It's been said too that Verstappen and Albon have similar driving styles, so why are the contrasting results so far? The car this season seems to be more unstable than last season, with a lot of problems with the aero package. It seems to me that Verstappen is a far more adaptable driver than Albon. While some of it comes down to experience, I personally believe this comes down more so to the driving ability of the pilot behind the wheel, and it's clear that Verstappen is more naturally gifted than Albon. Could Alex Albon ever get back into Formula 1 if he does indeed get axed from the sport? 100% there is a possibility for this. I mean, Daniel Kvyat was sacked of his full-time driving position towards the end of the 2017 season, and even though he didn't do any racing outside of doing simulator work for Ferrari, he was welcomed back in 2019 where he achieved that famous podium finish at that crazy Hockenheim race, and although he hasn't been great this year, he's done okay and had a super race a few days ago with his best finish of the season at 4th position. In saying this, however, he looks like he'll be out of the F1 door too, but he has shown that if you're hungry enough, you can get back into the sport. Romain Grosjean is another example of this. A driver that didn't really impress at his half season with Renault in 2009, but having kept his ties with the team and doing an excellent job in both AutoGP and GB2 in 2010 and 2011, this saw Grosjean get his second chance at Formula 1, and he went on to have an excellent career, being one of the better upper midfield drivers and gaining a nice amount of podiums in his peak as well. I could go further to say that Kimi Räikkönen and even Niki Lauda were also drivers that left and came back, but these two are probably not great examples here, as they are at a higher, more elite level of racing than Albon respectively. I should probably also mention Pierre Gasly too, where obviously he was demoted back to AlphaTauri just last season, but of course, the difference here is that Gasly got the chance to prove himself once again, and boy has he just. Unfortunately for Albon, the circumstances favoured Gasly at the time, and Yuki Tsunoda is now making a whole lot more noise this season in F2, which has just made things worse for Albon and his bid to stay in Formula 1. So for me, I think if possible, Albon should look to keep his ties with the Red Bull driver program for at least another season or two, and look to try and impress Helmut Marko and the other bosses as well, and work his way back up the program. Formula E looks to be a likely destination. He can look to hone in his driving abilities against some very good drivers in their own right. I'm sure he won't be going back into Formula 2 though. It wouldn't make sense in terms of the Red Bull program, and the quality of drivers on average is probably slightly lower than what is the case in Formula E. And you look at many of these Formula E drivers, they've had a high level of car racing experience, many of whom have actually already raced in Formula 1. IndyCars is another option, but I highly doubt Albon would be considering this. So in conclusion, Alex Albon probably shouldn't be in a Red Bull, especially in the circumstances of inexperience, which has led to these below par performances, and unfortunately due to the circumstances of the F1 driver market and the cutthroat Red Bull driver program, Alex Albon may find himself out of Formula 1, and there is a chance he never comes back in the sport. But his F1 dream is not over. Albon is still 24 years old, and if he can work hard in Formula E or wherever he goes for the next year or two, then he can make a bid for a comeback in Formula 1. But as it stands, Albon might already be walking a plank, and it will be a very hard road to work his way back into the pinnacle of motorsport. Subscribe to the channel for more content, and give the video a like if you enjoyed it or found it insightful.